is actually coming from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. He will be discussing to us pre-Hispanic maritime trade in Luzon. He is no less than Jasper Christian Gambito.
Good afternoon. Am I being heard?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. Again, good afternoon to everyone. I'm Jasper Christian Gambito, and I'm going to present to you my study about the pre-Hispanic maritime trade in Luzon. Prior to the culture contact with the Western colonizers in the 16th century, coastal communities had long existed in Luzon, as in other parts of the Philippine Archipelago. These communities, which were usually situated near major river systems, mostly relied on maritime trade as their main economic activity. Early conquest accounts suggest the complexity of these communities. It was also noted that some of which had developed economic and military alliances and were bound by their kinship affinities. This paper seeks to present hypotheses on the existence of a coastal trade network from Ilocos in the northern tip of Luzon and possibly up to Bicol in its southernmost extent. Lexical evidence, particularly the dictionaries written by Catholic friar-missionaries, as well as some pertinent archaeological finds, will be tapped with the researcher to prove his claim. The Philippines is usually described as a country divided by the sea. One cannot be blamed for having such kind of belief, especially because the country is an archipelago comprised of more than 7,000 islands. Although the sea separates the ancient Filipinos and their ancient neighbors from one another, this condition did not deter them from having connection and trade relations. Therefore, a revisit on ideas could give a realization that the sea is not a cause of division among the Proto-Filipino peoples and their Asian neighbors, but rather as an instrument in forging connection among the different pre-16th century communities. In the case of Luzon, the towering mountain ranges, vast plains, and other geographic features presented natural obstacles that may have prevented the peoples from having a smooth connection with one another. In the absence of a complex road network, the sea and the various bodies of water in the island played a crucial role in maintaining interconnectivity. While the bodies of water served as highways, the various boats and other sea crafts which plied the shores and river networks of the island facilitated the connection. For the sake of periodization, the pre-Hispanic period being referred to in this paper is limited to the proto-historic period, which ranges from the 9th century AD to 1521. Also, the term Luzon, which is used in this paper, is defined geographically, not politically. Thus, other islands such as Palawan, Masbate, Marinduque, and others, which are included in the southern Tagalog region, as well as the Batanes Archipelago, are not included in the scope of the study and may be a subject for subsequent research. Among the main difficulties in studying the pre-16th century Philippines is the lack of necessary documentary sources to create a narrative. Therefore, this paper will heavily rely on the studies made from allied disciplines, particularly from archaeology. Although this paper will tackle some of the trading activities done by the ancient peoples of Luzon, one of the goals of the research is to highlight the role of the boat in establishing connection among the pre-Hispanic riverine and coastal communities in the said island. Luzon and its pre-Hispanic setting. Luzon is the largest island in the Philippine Archipelago. Prior to the culture contact with the Western colonial powers, early settlements and communities were already thriving in Luzon and were engaged with regional maritime activities as evidenced by various artifacts found in the said island. Among the archaeological sites which could suggest the existence of a maritime trading activities include the following. As flashed here in this presentation, the remains of a vessel referred to as a biray in Pandan, Kawayan, Ilocos Sur. The recovery of local potteries and Chinese ceramic wares in Bolinao, Pangasinan, along with the Bolinao skull, the origin of which were estimated to be between the late 12th to 13th centuries AD to the 14th and 15th centuries AD. The discovery of habitation sites as well as ceramic trade wares in Porac, Pampanga. The excavation of habitation and burial sites in Santa Ana, Manila, along with the discovery of Chinese trade wares, estimated to be between the late 11th to the 14th century AD. The excavation in Pinagbayanan, Pila, Laguna, the earthenware complexes of Calatagan, Batangas, and the excavation in Albay province known as Cagraray cave sites, wherein Chinese porcelain and stoneware jars were recovered. Lara Juncker, in her book entitled Raiding, Trading, and Feasting, offered a new perspective, wherein she argued that contrary to the popular belief that the Chinese, Arab, and Indian traders were responsible for most of the long-distance trade shipping in the area, it was really the Malay peoples of Southeast Asia who facilitated the trade relation during the 10th century AD. The reason for this belief is mentioned by Scott, who assumed that the Chinese during the Tang dynasty had no knowledge on the existence of land between Taiwan and Java. However, the Chinese during the Sung dynasty had a different outlook, as Southeast Asian polities like Champa, Srivijaya, and Malacca started to trade luxury items with the Chinese. The latter took necessary actions to dominate this commercial activity, as evidenced by an edict found in ancient Chinese records, particularly in Songxi, superintendencies which supervised trade relations with the Arabs, Aceh, Java, Borneo, Mayi, and Srivijaya barbarians were established in Guangzhou, Hangzhou, and Pingzhou. For Scott, the inclusion of Mayi, which he presumed to be Mindoro, in the aforementioned Chinese document suggests its role as a trading center, facilitating the exchange of local goods on a Borneo-Phuket road, going further in assuming that it was a Bornean outpost. Ma Tuanlin, in his compilation of ancient Chinese documents entitled Wenshan Tongkao, mentioned that during the 7th year of the Taiping Xingkao period, certain traders from Mayi brought valuable merchandise to the Canton port. Scott calculated the year to be 982 AD and presumed that the Mayi merchants went there not on a tribute mission, but rather as direct traders. However, the belief that Mayi could be Mindoro was challenged by various individuals. For an instance, Ferdinand Blumentritt speculated that Mayi could either be Luzon, wherein Mayi could be its ancient name, Laguna de Bai, wherein he argued that Mayi was originally Bahi or Bahi, Bulacan, wherein Mayi was derived from the term Gatmaitan, referring to a chieftain named Maitan, who was the head of the area. Blumentritt's friend, Jose Rizal, also speculated that Mayi refers to the island of Luzon. On the other hand, Wati Ming's MA thesis, who argued that Mayi could be somewhere in Luzon and without dismissing the possibility that it could be in Laguna, speculated that it could be in the present-day Batangas. Another one was Gobon Juan, who speculated that it was in Bai in Laguna, which was referred to in the ancient Chinese texts. One of his considerations in that is that there are no Chinese equivalent for the sound of B in the Chinese, and the Chinese usually use the sound M to replace B. As an example, he related that Batangas is referred to by the Chinese as Batangan, Bataan as Miautaan, and Bicol as Mikot. One of his arguments styled that Laguna, particularly the lake area, is home to various archaeological sites wherein various trade wares were excavated as compared to Mindoro, which was inhabited by the Mangyans, whom he described as underdeveloped as of the present time, and wonders whether they were the same group of people described in ancient Chinese texts as the Mayi people who brought precious merchandise to the shores of Guangzhou 1,000 years ago. However, this presumption of Gobon Juan could not be easily dismissed, especially because of the fact that the Laguna copper plate, which is considered as the country's first written artifact, was discovered in the lake area, the content of which suggests a flourishing trade relations within the Tagalog region, mentioning pre-Hispanic communities of Paila, Puliran, and Tundun. Whether Mayi is in Mindoro or in Laguna remains to be a question and could be a subject for further research. On the other hand, it was also during the Sung dynasty that certain polities in the Philippines like Butuan started to send tribute missions to China, By the 14th century, the Ming dynasty rose to power, wherein their early rulers promoted commercial activities overseas. It was the records from this dynasty, particularly the Yumlo Tatien, that mentioned Malilu, Mai, Butuan, and Sulu as dependencies of Brunei. However, Maguindanao, referred to as Mintolang, was included on another list based on Wang Taiwan's Tao I Chilwe, which was coming from the previous dynasty, the Yuan dynasty. Scott mentioned that various Ming Dynasty historical records narrate the presentation of tribute embassies from Philippine polities like Luzon, Maulihu, presumably Mindoro or Marinduque, and Pangasinan. This information provide the necessary answer on how the various Chinese and Southeast Asian traders were able to reach the Philippines. Apart from the existence of coastal trading activities, interaction among the river communities also existed. A model was suggested by Juncker, which mentions that lowland-based communities competed with one another in order to attract long-distance traders to come and pass through their ports. These coastal communities rely on intra-regional and extra-regional trade involving interior communities, the latter serving as source of mountain products and the other upland raw materials, which could in turn be traded by the former. Her model was based on the previous work of Bennett Bronson on a similar phenomena in Sumatran maritime trading politics. For the sake of brevity, this paper will highlight the following areas as focus of the maritime activities done in Luzon during the pre-Hispanic period. First, the northwest Luzon, particularly the Ilocos area. The second is the central Luzon, particularly the Pampanga area. Third is the Manila area. Fourth, southern Luzon, which includes Laguna, Batangas, and maybe to an extent, the Bicol region. Evidences in northwest Luzon. Michael Canelao, in his dissertation, identified the following as the 5 gold networks in northwest Luzon. The first one is the Tonglo network, which connects the mines of Balatok, Akupan to the coast of Arignay and Agoo. The second is the Gaswelling network, which connects the gold mines of Apayao, Lokho, Kapkaben, and Katampan to the coast of Kalikamasan, Baratao, and Bawan. The third one is the Lepanto network, which connects the Lepanto mines with the coast of Tagudin and Purao, traversing Apaya and Danak. The fourth one is the Angaki network, which connects Patyakan, Minlawi, and possibly Lepanto mines with the coast of Dumacuaque and Candon, and the Abra network. Following the model given earlier by Juncker, these gold networks identified by Canilao serve as a good example on the interaction between coastal and upland communities in northwest Luzon. Gold, as well as other products coming from the mountains of the Cordilleras, were brought down to Ilocano coastal communities where they will in turn be traded to foreign merchants, particularly the Chinese. Although Spanish accounts mentions the richness of the Iloco coastal communities because of the gold found there, Canelao argues that the Ilocanos served as mediators only, and that the production of these gold items were from the mountain regions of northwest Luzon. He added that although the Cordilleras and Ilocos might be separated by the terrain, it did not deter them from having trade relation. Although gold mining activities during the pre-Hispanic period were not as expensive as compared to present-day mining activities, the presence of these gold networks is the reason why the region was able to be a part of a wide-reaching maritime trade network, arguing that some of this gold might have reached China. The pre-Hispanic Central Luzon, the case of Pampanga. Just like in Ilocos, the presence of a riverine network referred to in other Philippine polities as Ilaya-Ilawud network, is also evident in the case of Pampanga. Using the dictionaries of Father Diego Bergaño, Father Francisco Coronel, and Father Venancio Sanson, the existence of such network in Pampanga is referred to as Paralaya-Paroba Trade Network. Paralaya refers to the upstream direction. It also refers to either as the east, where the sun rises, or as north. Meanwhile, Paroba refers to the downstream direction and also refers to the orient, or the place where the sun sets. Paralaya communities refers to those located inland, while Paroba communities refers to those located along the coast of Manila Bay. The connection between the two sets of communities was made possible by the river networks crisscrossing Pampanga, serving as the province's first thoroughfares. Paralaya communities serve as sources of upland and inland materials like hardwood, wild rice, beeswax, and other exotica. These materials will then be sent to Paroba communities, which in turn will exchange trade commodities like jade ceramics, uh, salt, and other lowland products. The exchange of trade goods is evidenced by the discovery of burial jars as well as southern Song and Yuan dynasty porcelains. In Hacienda Ramon in Porac, Pampanga, an area which is considered in this paper as a Paralaya community. Manila is considered as one of the oldest areas in the country which had been involved in maritime trading activities. The discovery of the pre-Hispanic community in Sapa and the excavation of various human burials, shells, remains of animals like pigs, as well as Chinese ceramics, along with other jewelry suggests that the area was once engaged in a flourishing maritime commercial activity. All right. Now, for the case of Manila, Cesar Mahul argued that Manila, along with nearby areas, were already in the process of Islamization. As a consequence of the Islamization of the Malay archipelago and through the efforts of Bornean rulers who sent missionaries to further their trade relations and the extent of Islam. All right. I'm being mentioned that 5 minutes left. Okay, maybe I'm going to fast forward and going to the main point, the role of boats in commercial activities. I prepared here some of the terms in Ilocano, Kapampangan, and Tagalog dictionaries, which may refer to boats and other maritime trading activities. Now, I'm making a hypothesis here wherein I'm telling that the boat, which was primarily used by the peoples back then, was the biray. The terms mentioned in the tables were not as exhaustive, as there are several other terms which were not included in the list. However, for the sake of discussion, it is argued that these lexical terms serve as evidence on the existence of maritime trading terms on the subconscious mind of the peoples of Luzon. The rich pool of terms related to boats and other activities associated with it suggests the important role played by these vessels in connecting the riverine and coastal communities. On the case of Ilocos, there were terms referring to sampans and the consciousness of the existence of the people residing in distant lands. In Ilocano, they call it as balyu, suggesting the involvement or interaction with foreigners, presumably merchants. Now, as what is presented here in the slide, that is a viray, which is evident in the Ilocano, Kapampangan, and Tagalog languages. It is hypothesized that the biray is among the primary boats utilized by the Proto-Filipinos in conducting intercoastal trading activities in Luzon, although this hypothesis needs to be subjected to further research to prove the claim. The tendency of the use of biray in long-distance travel is evidenced by the definition given by Father Caro in his Spanish Ilocano dictionary, wherein he defined it as a small boat that could reach Manila. Scott, on the other hand, mentioned that these vessels were used to facilitate Manila, Ilocos, Cagayan trade. On the other hand, Galang mentioned that the small size of these boats made it unstable. That is why these were navigated only near the shore and could possibly not used in inter-island trading due to the tendency of being smashed by tall waves. While biray is hypothesized as among the primary boats used in facilitating intercoastal trading activities, small boats as well as rafts were used in facilitating internal trading activities between the coastal or riverine and the inland or upland communities. Now, for the conclusion. The quest for fully reconstructing pre-Hispanic maritime history is a journey which is yet to be completed. While this paper offers a hypothesis on the conduct of maritime trade and the use of specialized type of boats in facilitating it in the island of Luzon, the researcher is aware on its limitations. Maritime trade in this sense shall not be confined alone to coastal trading activities, primarily because among the main products which were traded by these communities were sourced inland or upland. Thus, a complete picture should include an external trade network. That is, in the case of this paper, the trade relation between the island of Luzon and the other East and Southeast Asian countries. The second is an inter-island or intercoastal trade network, which connects the various coastal communities in the island. And the third one is an internal trade network, which involves coastal or riverine and inland or upland communities. Before I end, I want to leave this quote which I made when I was still the curator of Ames Museo Maritimo. The Philippines is not an archipelago that is divided by the sea, but an archipelago connected by the sea. The bodies of water serves as highways, while the boat facilitates the connectivity. That is all my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Jasper, Sir Jasper Cambito. That was very enriching. For our participants, you can actually write your questions if you have any from the box Q&A and the chat box. Just press the button, corresponding button below. And for Sir Gambito, wait for a while. We will be back for the open forum. Okay, so Jasper Gambito is here with us now. I'll start with the questions, several questions that are actually perhaps can be simply answered. And if ever we will lack time, because the next session will start also at 3:30, then perhaps those who have questions can actually directly ask our presenters. To Mr. Gambito, the question here is, what reference or books did you use for the types of boats in the presentation? Are they available online?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, they were available online. However, during my days as curator of the Museo Maritimo, I happened to become acquainted with Mr. Ray Santiago, and he became a personal friend of mine. That is why he was able to give me some of his personal documents, which served as my sources for these different kinds of boats. As a matter of fact, if you're going to search in the internet, the mostly used sketches of these ancient sea vessels were drawn by Ray Santiago. Some of the originals were handed over to me.
Okay. Still another question for you, Sir Gambito, about Biray. Are there any attempt by scholars to recreate a replica of the said boat, just like what they did to the Balanghay boats? How is it different from the Balanghay in terms of technical and structural technology in making the vessel? Yes, sir. Go.
All right. By the way, this could be a subject for another talk. Maybe we could
Yes.
have a personal correspondence. I will give my email, or maybe the organizers could give my email. However, my study is based on the paper presented by some members of the National Museum, and it said that there is remains of a biray in Pandan, Kawayan, Ilocos. However, these remain to be in situ because other archaeologists would say that it would be best to leave these sites in its condition, not to excavate it, so that it could be subject for deterioration. That is why, just like in Butuan, there are some balangay boats which remains to be in situ in order to prevent further deterioration. I have no idea whether there are some attempts by other scholars in recreating balangay. What is the difference in terms of the structural technology? There are different kinds of vessels in the Philippines in the pre-colonial past. We have the plank-built boats, etc., etc. So as what I've mentioned, I would be very happy to have personal correspondence with you, sir, so that we could have more fruitful discussions.
That was a question from Jason Salibay, and the previous one was from Sherwin Romosa. We still have third one. Highly from Nonya Tionco. Highly interested in including the presentation of Mr. Jasper Gambito in Santa Rosa Study Center Inang Bayan, Santa Rosa Heritage Series with other papers. Okay. It's not really a question, but it's something like a request coming from you. From you that your paper be included in the Santa Rosa Study Center. Do we still
Yes,
have
ma'am.
more questions? you can actually react or probably send an or email to Nonya Tionko. Do
Yes,
we
ma'am,
still
I
have?
will.
Okay, okay. So do we still have question here?
I think there was a message in the chat box, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm trying
Uh,
to read. There's a very okay. There's a very long question here. For Professor Jasper, do you have any information related to Malacca Luzon trade in the 15th century? As I understand, during the early Portuguese Malacca, the Portuguese placed a Luzones as a tumingwang in the city of Malacca. Thank you for your response. Okay.
Hello, thank you for the question. As what I've said, what I'm doing right now is a preliminary study, and as what I've said in the conclusion, it is a subject yet to be completed. However, my preliminary information about the Malacca Luzon trade is based on the writings of Mahul. Okay, it is said that that Luzon is a part of the Sulu zone, and the Sulu zone is the main center of trading activities during the time. And Sulu is connected with different parts of Southeast Asia, like Malacca and Brunei. So Luzon is just a part of that bigger Sulu zone, based on the writings of Cesar Mahul.
Okay, you can actually refer to the chat box. There are actually many who responded to you, something like basic information on what you can do in the sharing of your study. For Mr. Ligero, it's actually from Sir Ambet Ocampo. He is saying he can send you a photo of the Sokpakan, then that result sent to Berlin Museum. So you can also refer to this. Okay, what else? Do we still have more? No more questions in the chat box?
Excuse
And
me, I
is
think there
in
is a
the
question
Q
from
and
Philemon.
Q&A. There's
I'm
still,
sorry.
yeah. May I kindly, it's actually coming from John Emmanuel de Guzman. May I kindly ask for the slides of the presentation? Oh, well, it's Sir Jeffrey. Someone is asking for your slides. John Emmanuel de Guzman, probably because they were not able to see very much your slides a while ago. For Sir Ligiro again, where's the oldest lantak or fire piston found in Southeast Asia? Is there any archaeological study made about this?
Um, the first uh, the first specimen collected in Southeast Asia was from Borneo and Java in 1865.
Okay.
But regarding archaeological
Study.
studies or findings, I haven't encountered any yet.
So there's still another question. Thank you, sir. That's coming from an anonymous attendee. From Maria Nella Florendo. Sir Jasper, are there also studies on maritime northeastern Luzon? Or is the absence of studies due to the fact that the northeastern coastline is not conducive to maritime trade character of the coastline?
All right, ma'am. The question is about the Northeast. I have no idea about the Northeast. If there are any available studies about the Northeastern Luzon, maybe that could be an interesting topic for further research. The only idea I have are the writings of Christopher Bueno and Michael Canilao based on the Northwestern Luzon studies.
Okay, so I think the drawing from Philemon, what's this? Professor Gambito, the drawing of the prehistoric, what is that? Where is that? The drawing of the pre-Hispanic coastal boat showed the parts of the vessel and the term identified them. For instance, so I think there's no question here. These are
Let me answer that, ma'am. Maybe he's
okay. Can
clarifying
react on it.
Yeah, maybe he's asking why is it because I presented a description of a biray and it uses some Spanish terms in referring to the different parts of the boat. The study is based on the writings of Santiago and Maharlika Cuevas, wherein it is more on anthropological study. That is why they
Mm-hmm.
were able to interview contemporary people. You see, Biray, although it existed during the pre-Hispanic times, it continued to exist during the Spanish colonial period until the American period. And Christopher Bueno argues that the last Biray was docked in Pandan in 1970s. So the study of Santiago and Cuevas was based on contemporary terms used by locals with reference to the different parts of the Biray. And it does not necessarily mean that the terms used were also the same terms used during the pre-Hispanic period.
Okay, so very good clarification. Do we still have, I think we have no more questions in the Q&A box. Do you see? Okay, so that we can actually move on to the next chat box. No more. As you can see, there are a lot of, well, they are not really that questions. They are some sort of a sharing, uh, simply because we are PHA members and we, as members, it's part of our collaboration that we help each other. And so you gave us very enriching topics. There are also those who will be very willing to give you more to enrich also your, what they call this one, paper or your research. Since we are actually, it's almost time, and this is our way of saying thank you from the Philippine Historical Association and other partners of this conference to Mr. Jeffrey James Ligero and Mr. Gambito, I forgot, Jasper Christian Gambito for that very interesting and enriching papers. So thank you. And
Thank you.
then I think we are ready for the next, unless, as I was saying, if there are participants who wants to ask more questions, you can actually email our kapwa PHA. They are also members of this organization. So we can move actually to the next session. I think it's still on maritime trade, but this time it will be taken over by, oh, there's a hand raised. Where is that? Someone is asking? Ma'am, hand raised. Do we have any? I can't see in my. Please ask Mr. Felimon to speak. Who is Mr. Felimon? Can we please? Okay, Sir Felimon. Go ahead, sir.
The drawing that you presented, Professor Gambito, of the coastal boat, it showed the terms of the various parts. And I noted that some of the terms were in Spanish. But if this were pre-Hispanic, they should be using local words. So why is it that, for instance, you indicate, what was indicated there was timon for the rudder and camarote for the cabin which are the nipa huts on the boat. Why were these terms used during that time? Why were the Spanish words used during the pre-Hispanic time?
Did you get that, Sir Jasper Gambito?
Yeah, I think that was the subject of the clarification I made earlier. As what I've mentioned, Sir Philemon, the study is based on the article written by Reynaldo Santiago and Maharlika Cuevas, they interviewed contemporary locals from Ilocos region. Therefore, the basis of the different terms used in the different parts of the boats were based on contemporary locals. That is why there are some terms which were in Spanish. You see, the biray, although it was used in the pre-Hispanic period, it continued to thrive during the colonial period. And as what I mentioned, Christopher Buena said that the last biray docked in Pandan in 1970. So therefore, some of the terms, some of the Spanish terms were inculturated, I think, or used by the locals. That is why there are terms like timon, camarote, cabina, etc. So that's my view on that, Sir Philemon. I hope that clarified your concern.
Thank you very
Okay,
much,
thank
Mr.
you.
Gambito. Thank you very much. You'll have a really very interesting correspondence with Mr. Philemon after this. Okay, so shall we move to the next panel? You have the third panel.